You're listening to Retail Disrupted, a podcast that explores the latest industry developments and the trends that will shape how we shop in the future. I'm your host, Natalie Berg. On today's episode, we are talking department stores and pop-up shops with David Blakeney. David is a highly experienced operator within the retail sector. He has over 35 years of experience working for big brands such as Allders Duty, Arcadia, and House of Fraser. At House of Fraser, he was the store development director, overseeing all space planning, design, and build projects, working with over 250 major brands. Recently, David was the business and store development director at Sook Retail, and now he's moving on to launch a new venture, which we'll hear all about later on in the show. David currently serves as an honorary officer for the 20 Club Committee, and he also co-founded and ran the hugely successful House of Fraser charity event. I always have great conversations with David about department stores and how they have to evolve in order to stay relevant in the future. And so it's great to finally get him on the show and to be able to bring some of those conversations to you over the next 30 minutes or so. I hope you find value in today's show. And as always, if you are enjoying the content, I'd be very grateful for a quick rating or review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. David, welcome to Retail Disrupted. It's so great to see you and have you on the show today.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be able to join you.
Great. Now, David, we're going to talk about your extensive career in retail, from duty-free shopping to department stores to pop-up shops. Your most recent role was business and store development director at Sook, the pop-up specialist, which unfortunately stopped trading earlier this year. But we're going to talk about the learnings from your time there. We're going to talk about what comes next for you and where you see the big opportunities for pop-up retail going forward. So let's start with your views on the wider retail market. We know it's a tough environment. We know it's always evolving. How would you describe the state of retail right now?
You have to put two slants on it. It's challenging, but then there's huge opportunities. And I think that's a mixture. And that, I think, is going to really separate these days the innovative and the good from the people who are more static in what they're doing. And therefore, the need to do more and different and experiential is far more critical, because the market is moving much quicker than ever before.
When we spoke previously, you said that physical retail is on the cusp of a new dawn. I wonder if you can elaborate on this for our listeners. How do you see bricks and mortar retail evolving in the future?
I think, in a way, the sort of rebirth of physical and the reset for physical has had some positivity because of COVID. And I think, in a way, if you look at a lot of the online companies, they thought it was going one way. Look at the share prices. There's some of the big five companies, they're 90% down on the share price. Food was up to 16, 17% online. It's gone down back to about 11 or 12%. You know, we had 35% maybe overall, back down to 27%. So I think inadvertently, physical has come back. It's also pushed people now to do things in a very different way. Mary Portas, I thought a year ago, I know I've met Mary many times over the years, and I worked with her when she launched her brand in our House of Fraser store. But she said a great quote she had a year ago, she's the one who said the cusp of new dawn. What she was getting at was the renaissance is in this hyper-physical retail. It's multi-sensory, it's inventive, it's instinctive shopping experiences. It's not just about selling stuff anymore. It's connecting people and creating emotional connection that is actually building. Storytelling is, you have the ability to storytell now with brands. And I think it was one of the best quotes I've seen, so I always quote it. And I think she's bang on there.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I just think that it is kind of counterintuitive in a way that it took a pandemic and this huge shift to online shopping. It actually took that for us to recognize that the how much we love stores and the role that they
Yeah,
play. And as you say, that is evolving. It can't just be a place to buy stuff, but it's got to be about so much more when you consider that you can buy anything with a tap or a touch of a button. Now we've got the world at your fingertips. So
yeah,
how do we repurpose physical retail, and what does that look like? And I think some of the things you just mentioned, experience, storytelling, the human touch, marrying up the physical and digital, which I know you're really passionate about, that to me
yeah,
feels like the future. That's what's relevant to customers today. So I want to stick with the theme of physical retail and get your thoughts on department stores, because I know you spent a lot of time at House of Fraser. And
yeah.
I want to ask you a very straightforward question. Do you think that department stores are on the path to extinction, or do you think they can still be relevant in this digital age?
I think there's definitely a place for department stores. There's never going to be a place for the amount of department stores that were out there. I think the luxury spectrum, without doubt, your Selfridges and your Fortnum and Masons, without doubt, have a place. I think independent department stores, to a degree, have a place in certain locations. They can still offer, I think, people want. Um, but what department stores mainstream need is a real injection of innovation. And I think they need to be extremely brave and be less traditional. I think what won't work is just walking into the same old traditional department store as we've always done. It has to be almost turned upside down. And I've got, quite a lot of these. I mean, the first thing you do when you walk into a department store, you see beauty. No harm in that. But if you're going to just see the same brands, it becomes a bit mundane. It's been going for 30, 40, 50 years, the same brands. What we need to see, beauty has got a massive array now of disruptive brands. And it's one sector that is incredibly booming with new brands. And there's just endless amount of those brands. And I'd love to see department stores shake themselves up and start to put a lot of those new brands. And if you walk in the store, maybe if they put them down the middle and put all the classic brands around the back, and walk into that store and just see different things weekly or a monthly basis, which just you don't just put anyone in, but it's something that complements the big brands. It's smaller brands who've got something unique about them and something that people are looking for. And there are certain, new brands coming through like that, where I think and maybe do it with a bit more of the digital, so it tells that story through the digital screens. So there's movement when you walk in, and there's newness, and it keeps going through. The other thing about and something I've worked on quite a lot is I believe that department stores should start to look at maybe reformatting to what I call worlds of. Maybe taking a floor by floor approach where why not just have, instead of just having the traditional menswear, ladies wear, start to bring areas together. So I did quite a lot of work actually before I left House Fraser, and I would have liked to have been involved in the implementation. But I was looking at creating floors, which could be a well-being floor. You could put the leisure in there, the sports, the juice bars, everything to do with well-being was on that floor. And then you could integrate the new brands that were coming through. For kids and toys, shake that up and have everything to do with kids and toys, but make it a destination place. We had a place in House of Fraser, Manchester, on the top floor. We used to have Hamlets, and we'd have lots of kids, but there was nothing about that floor was exciting. But if you start to create theatre and almost experiences for kids for half term and school holidays, make the space flexible. You can have parties in there. You can have a barber shop, a shoe shop. The barber shop can have the little aeroplane things, and they can sit in the planes. You can do a huge amount where it isn't just selling stuff. They're coming in. They could have an area where people can have climbing, the climbing walls and things like that. Just a bit of experience. And then you could have, and beauty could be the other thing I'd mentioned about beauty. I'd love to start seeing like a personal shopper area for beauty when people don't just help you for those individual brands. You could have a personal shopping area and an area where people can test and trial different products, helped by people who have knowledge on all the brands, not just one. And you could have experiential pods. And I'd love to see you walk in, more of the hair dryers going on, and the makeup artists, and people walking around saying, we'll get you made up because you're going to the theatre later. So we'll do, makeup and get you ready to go out to the theatre. And we had a whole experiential proposal we were going to do in Cheltenham. And I just think you drive that, you drive that little mini champagne bar. Let's just make it so good that you don't want to leave. And that to me. So that's for department stores.
But,
There's
David,
a couple of other things.
Do you think that, I don't know, listening to what you say, it sounds obvious, right? In some ways, like it sounds like that is how any department store should be thinking in this kind of digital era where you need to give them something more, you need to give them an experience. So I'm totally on board with your vision. And it feels like some department stores have attempted this kind of shift to experiential shopping, putting gyms in their stores and, restaurants and all kinds of other experiences and taking some floor space away from just product. But it still doesn't seem to have really worked. And I imagine it's not a cheap thing to do as well. So do you think maybe the uncomfortable truth is we just have too many department stores?
No, I don't think people have gone far enough with it. All right, I'll give you an example here. A lot of people want to put food and beverage at the back of a store. And I'm like, we did a trial in Manchester where we put a top brand called San Carlo. We created a brand called San Carlo Cicchetti. We put it on the ground floor in the corner right at the front of the store. You could walk in off the street. You can make it 24/7, so you can make it, or not 24/7, but you can close late and open early and make it out of hours. But it's people who, when they then come in, they go in there, then they come into the store. You're not hiding it away. Or you have champagne bars in areas that are right in the middle of the floor where people can do people watching because they love doing. We opened a champagne bar in Belfast in a window, but it was a massive window and it was doing nothing. We opened it and people love sitting there because they like watching people. I don't think people are going far enough. You've got to really make a statement and you've got to be bold. And I think that's the missing bit. I think people are playing with it. If you look at Selfridges, they do that corner shop. It's on a ground floor and it's fantastic. It's really quite interesting. You've got to just be a bit more innovative.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Selfridges does do a very good job. I mean, you can go and do some skateboarding. You can watch a movie. You can even get married in a Selfridges, apparently. So yeah, I think that's probably a great example, one to call out. But again, Selfridges has a handful of stores, so maybe that's part of the reason why they can be as innovative and as bold in their thinking.
But they have more money as well. Obviously, they have a bigger capex. And the other stores will not have at the moment the capex. And I think what stores need to do is say, well, if we do get some capex, let's do it in the critical, obvious areas to do. In other words, if you can't do a whole store, just do it in certain areas that will make a statement. And just spend it wisely.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one more point about department stores, because I noticed that the old House of Fraser flagship on Oxford Street has been sold and is being converted to a mixed-use development. And this got a lot of press a couple of weeks ago when the news came out. So it's going to have some retail space. It's going to have office space, restaurants. It's going to have a gym with a swimming pool. And I spoke to Nigel Oddie recently, who I know you know quite well. He's the former CEO at House of Fraser. And he told me that we should expect more of this kind of repurposing of space. Would you agree with that? Do you think this is how we make our high streets more relevant for today's shoppers?
Well, 100%. I mean, people might not remember, but in 1995 or maybe 2003, sorry, Dickens and Jones on Regent Street was a department store. That was repurposed with a restaurant on the top floor with some offices and ground floor retail. So people did start doing those sort of things. Ulster Street is the Ulster Street store, believe it or not, we didn't have the money and we didn't own the lease. So we didn't have the money to do the work we wanted. But we did have plans to put a major restaurant on the top floor. We did have plans to have offices, which were put our own office there. And if you look at the plans for Oxford Street, you'll see so much wasted space. That was all back of house. There was also about £10 million worth of remedials to do to the front of the building or the side of the building because there were lots of problems on the outside. So it was capex restraint, which is a real shame. The landlords, I think, have done a brilliant job now, or whoever's doing the work, of what they're trying to repurpose. And I think they've gone a bit further than others by putting in your gyms and some other things as opposed to just offices or retail or restaurants. I think they're going a little bit further and doing a lot more interesting. And if you look at the square footage, it's going to be at least about, I think, 30% more space that they're going to claim back properly. So I think it's 100% right.
Yeah, interesting. So let's move on to pop-up retail. And as I mentioned at the start, Sook is sadly no longer trading, but I imagine it was a great experience, especially with so many brands looking for pop-up space during the pandemic. I wonder if you can share some of the key learnings from your time there and just get a flavor of how you see pop-up retail today.
I think the number one learning was there was definitely a gap in the market for it. And that might sound a bit strange when it's just run out of money, but that the gap in the market, it wasn't due to a lack of a gap in the market, it was due to other reasons. The learnings were everyone I know in the industry and customers alike absolutely loved the Sook concept. It was different to any other pop-up concept. It was more premium, and it had the ability to allow brands to make a much bigger statement than they would normally have done because they had digital screens. You could convert those stores very quickly into...
Sorry, David, I'm going to interrupt you for a sec. I'm just conscious that some of our listeners actually might not know about Sook. So maybe if we just back up and you could just share some details about the concept.
Yeah, so Sook aimed for the premium market, for brands to represent themselves for a short space of time, which was meant to be originally anywhere from even an hour, but it really, realistically, it was from one day only. It had digital screens which enable brands and anyone to be able to put all their content, which enable people to either storytell about the product or make it look like your own shop through the content you put through the screen. And it was meant to be something that anybody could take the space to do anything from, and it wasn't just selling. Even one couple got married in their Cambridge store. So you could even get married in there. But the variety, the variety and the width of opportunity that came out of pop-ups under a Sook was anything, anyone, anytime, in any way would go. And there's not one thing that wouldn't work in there if it was the right thing to put in. So that's what a Sook was, and very, very different, and there's no one else like them out there.
Yeah, that's a really helpful kind of overview for I'm just conscious we have a lot of international listeners who maybe weren't as familiar as our UK ones. So sorry, carry on, David. You were telling me about some of the key learnings during your time at Sook.
So the key learnings were that it did need premium locations with high footfall. That was for this type of concept was very important. The key learnings were that maximum utility and maximum diversification in whatever you put in was critical for that type of concept. It didn't have enough locations, and we only had 9 or 10, you need a really mass market of 30, 40 locations. So I don't think the brands quite often could use us because we weren't in the right place, and that was one of the things that was a shame. We learned through test and trial ourselves who would work and who wouldn't and what would work. And that took quite a lot of time to learn exactly what type of pop-ups would work in our stores. And it wasn't always the obvious ones. So the other learning was it's sustainable and cost effective because you didn't have to fit it out. So for the listeners, the other thing is it was a fully flexible space, which had not only digital screens, but it had built around the screens. It had uprights, which allowed you to put shelves and hanging fixtures in front of the screens. So you could merchandise fully. Within half an hour, you could turn it from a digital shop to a physical shop within half an hour and fully merchandise it, because there were floor fixtures that were at the back and there was perimeter were turned into arms and shelves. So that gave people the ability to have a half-half ratio, 20% ratio, whatever they want. So the key learning was flexibility of space and ease of space. We made it very easy because we had an onboarding team. So you literally can pitch up, bring your whatever you're going to use for the pop-up, and you could be open in 30 to 40 minutes and you were fully functional, and it was easy. You didn't have to do much. So that was you're making people's lives easy, which is the most important thing.
Yeah, cutting friction, right? Just really like we keep saying about retailers, the need to kind of cut friction and make things as easy and seamless as possible. I mean, the same applies here, right? Just, make it convenient, make it easy, and it works.
The easier you make it, the more successful it is. And sometimes things are so obviously easy, people go, no, I can't do that, because it's too easy, but it's not. I sometimes think the very obvious works a lot more than trying to pontificate or make it complicated. In any store I ever go to, I've always said you need good wayfaring. You've got to be able to find your way around, say, a store. You've got to find things easy. Things need to be made easy from a point of even down to where the toilets, where's the restaurants, where's this, down to ideas. Sometimes it's really simple ideas that makes it easy for customers. And that's what they want. And the more you make it easy, the more they'll come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to get your thoughts on the benefits of pop-up retail for the high street and whether some verticals are better suited to a pop-up setting than others.
Interestingly enough, I would say the most popular verticals was beauty, skincare and hair care, health and fitness, footwear, athleisure, sports to a degree, and possibly jewellery, accessories and technology. Those verticals seem to be the most popular. For us, I think the least popular in the end was women's wear and menswear. I think maybe because there's such a huge influx of new, smaller and online businesses in those other areas who wanted to have a piece of the high street. They're areas that are much more booming when you look at beauty. There's some great ideas on technology. So just if you go through that, there's things like in technology, there's a company called Raspberry Pi, and they are brilliant at pop-ups because they are about building your own computer. So they do a 3 or 4 day pop-up. You go, you queue, and they go, here we are, we queued. Yeah, we bought it. They sell out in about 3 days and they go on to the next shop. But that was that successful in the end. I think they've actually opened a couple of standalones. On beauty, we have people like Ella and Joe, who's an Irish brand, top Irish skincare brand. They could come over here and showcase themselves. OPI, Debenhams did a collaboration with MAC in there. You've got some of the new fitness and health brands and food and drink. If it's dry January, the non-alcoholic drinks people want to do something. If it's January and it's back to the gym, you've got the athleisure people. So those sorts of areas, and verticals were the key. There's another vertical which was quite interesting, and I don't think enough of the people who've done it in this sector is banking. banking's got two positive things. They're closing loads of stores. So there's a gap in the market where they're closing the stores. So banks can and have done, but not enough, use a pop-up after they close a high street for a couple of years, use a pop-ups for customers, just to get used to them not being there. But also they can use it for selling their services. So one company, I think Lloyd's did it. They did something called making a statement, and it was to educate the customer about if you don't read your statement, you go overdrawn because you don't know what money you've got. So they did a whole thing called making a statement, and it was like an art exhibition in that format. So that was a great example. The other thing I would like to see banks doing is support their small businesses and their sustainable businesses and this whole trajectory of. So if you take the Alison Hammond campaign with Nat West, why not? If you're going to support those people, the marketing exercise, why not take that even further and give them a shop as well, or a store to operate from to promote their business, when applicable? Because that whole circle then of supporting small businesses says, we're a bank, we lend money to small businesses, but we're going to support them. So, I think MasterCard and a few other people actually did use a Sook for that particular reason. And it was really good because actually when you're walking past a shop, if you're seeing 5 or 6 different businesses being supported, but the name over the door was either Barclays or NatWest or MasterCard, they're showing to the public we're actually being a bit more supportive here. So there's a lot of that sort of supportive side as well. So that was a few things. So that was a few ideas of verticals.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I like the idea of a brand or a business using pop-up space to communicate a specific message. So not just, do more business with us or buy more stuff from us, but to your point around Lloyd's saying, check your statement. Or I know Debenhams had a pop-up space to promote their loyalty card. So, using it for specific use case, the kind of flexibility allows you to do that, right? And reach customers in a physical setting in a very relevant way.
It's a marketing exercise. It's a brand awareness. It's a test and trial, which is a massive thing. It's additional space for peak trading times, like take Pandora. They take extra space, even though they've got one in a city centre, they might need a second. Fragrance shop might be the same, they might need space. Customer acquisition, it's quite expensive now getting in customers online through Google and those measures, but I think it's a cheaper customer acquisition of having a shop now. And so do some trial on that. Influencer activations, it's good for research and development. And the list is endless of those benefits. And if I go to test and trial, by the way, one of the amazing things about test and trial is there's lots and lots of stores who sell more than one vertical, one category. Shops sell accessories, jewelry, handbags, shoes, kids, beauty. So if you take one vertical, say, well, we're doing really well on dresses in the summer, and you're, I don't know, New Look or whoever, we're going to take a dress shop. Just because we don't have enough space in dresses, we'll take a dress shop for a month to promote. Or someone might say, well, the best way of customer acquisition is we want to get more young customers, but their young customers are buying maybe jewelry and not something else. So why not take a jewelry shop and promote the fact you're doing jewelry, get that customer acquisition, and drive them back into your stores? That's one of the things I would love to see a bit more of. I think it's a really good way to do it.
Yeah, super interesting. Now, I want to talk specifically about how online retailers and online brands are utilizing pop-up space. Now, at the start of the year, I worked with the BBC on a piece about pop-ups for both TV and an article on the homepage, which I'll link to in the show notes. Now, the title of the article was, Can Pop-Up Shops Help to Regenerate Our High Streets? I'm not even going to bother asking you that, David, because I know the answer.
Yeah.
But I want to just make a couple points. Now, the first thing I said to the BBC was that there used to be this fear that e-commerce would sound the death knell for the high street. But we've all learned that physical and digital retail can not only happily coexist, but we're seeing this convergence between both online and offline worlds. And I know that's something you're really passionate about. And then the second point was just around the online to offline trend more generally, because we're seeing everyone from the big giants like Amazon and ASOS down to much smaller independent businesses. Look, in all of these retailers are looking to open stores on the high street, and for reasons that you've already touched on. To engage with customers in a real life setting, to do it with the digital screens, to kind of incorporate both physical and digital. And I guess if we just specifically look at pop ups, I guess what would you say, David, are the main benefits for online brands looking to make that move into the physical retail world?
About 35 to 40% of online businesses want a space on a high street. The reason they want a space is they've realised that you cannot just sell through one channel anymore. You need to have various channels. Therefore, the physical channel to mix with the digital channel is the best way to do it. What they get out of it is they get a much more of they give that customer, they can drive the customer, and it gives them a lot more of a feel for the brand. Also, it's them getting to know the brand. You don't really know the brand in the same way, because if you've got salespeople in the store, they can talk more about the brand and sell to the brand. So it's quite important that by having a voice, you're able then to sell the brand in a very different way to online. And of
It
course, the
humanizes
benefit
the brand a little bit, doesn't it? Like being
it
able to
does. It
engage with
makes
real
it a bit
people.
more real, and it's a great opportunity. And they will normally mix that up. Most online businesses, what they have to do and mix it up is they will have events. Who would have thought a small brand would have a shop on Oxford Street with 400,000 people a week or 200,000 a week walking past? Yeah, it's that dream that, oh my God, I've got a store for a week, and look at, and they really push that online. So those people online then go into the store and see it, and that becomes a connection then. So that's the main ones, to be honest.
And they
And
then
it just
go
gets the
back
brand.
and buy online, don't they? Because we know about this very well documented halo effect, where when you open a physical space, temporary or permanent, it does tend to drive sales online, which might seem a
Yeah.
little bit counterintuitive, but to your point around brand awareness and the physical space being a form of media today, it makes perfect sense.
Well, it does, but actually, believe it or not, I think it does the opposite as well. I
What, in terms
think
of
you go
driving?
online, look at it, and you go in the shop and you look at it and go, I'm going to buy it now. So it can do the exact reverse, and I think as much of that is happening today than the other way around.
Yeah, I guess ultimately it's about giving customers choice, isn't it? About, shopping on their terms and choosing how and when to do the research, to speak to people, to read the reviews, and then ultimately to make that transaction. So, to your
Yeah.
point, or your previous point, you do have to engage with customers in both a physical and digital setting. Now, David, we are coming to the end of our conversation. Firstly, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been great to have you on. I always enjoy our conversation. So, thank you again for taking the time to share your views and your experiences. One final question for you, David. What comes next?
Well, after Sook, I realised there's still a big gap in the market, and the gap is that landlords have got space still, and uh, you've got brands who want space. But if you talk to lots of people, the bandwidth for both landlords and for brands, everyone's got so much on the plate at the moment. Everyone is fighting all sorts of fires. Everyone is really quite busy, and sometimes people might have the will to do it, but don't have the bandwidth to do it on both sides of the fence. So with what I've did at Sue, I just see there's a great opportunity, and what I want to do is continue that journey. Now, it won't be the same as what Sook are because they had all the digital screens, but I think there's a good way that I know lots of landlords, I know lots of brands, and I'd like to carry on trying to bring those two together. So I've formed a business called Phygital Retail. So I now want to sort of get much more involved in helping brands and helping landlords work with each other and take the pain out for them, just take on that workload. And also help smaller brands I want to do who are only online, who want to open stores, because part of my expertise was opening stores and helping them on the journey of opening their first store or opening more stores. That's part of my journey. I did it a lot at House of Fraser. So it's almost merging everything I've known in the last 35, 40 years and bringing that together in today's world.
Fantastic. David, I wish you all the best with the new venture. And thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Retail Disrupted. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the podcast, please leave a rating or review or share it with others. It really makes a difference.